Hey everyone, welcome back to Product Mastery in the age of AI and ChatGPT. I'm your host, Madhumita. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. If you built an AI agent today and it could do anything, book the meeting, refund the customer, ship the code, flag the fraud case, how much of that would you actually let it do without asking you first? Most teams answer that question by accident. Not on purpose, it just happens. Someone ships an agent with a tool call, nobody thinks hard about the blast radius, and 3 weeks later you're in an incident review asking, wait, why did it do that? Today we are talking about what I call the autonomy dial, the single most consequential and most under designed decision in agentic product work. Not is the model good enough, not what LLM should we use, the dial, how much decision making authority you hand to the machine, and when. 30 minutes, let's get into it. A year or two ago, the product question was, can the model do the task? That's mostly solved for a huge range of tasks. The frontier has moved. The real question now is a trust and governance question. Given that the model probably can do the task, should it be allowed to unsupervised in this context at this moment? That's a completely different kind of question. Can it is a capability question. You answer it with evals and benchmarks. Should it alone is a risk question. You answer it with judgment, with domain knowledge, with an understanding of what failure actually costs you. And I think a lot of product teams are still answering a risk question with a capability answer. They see the demo work 9 times out of 10 and they ship full autonomy because the demo felt magical. But the 10th time is the one that ends up in your post mortem. If you worked anywhere near fraud, risk, healthcare, finance, or anything with real world consequences, you already know this instinctively. In my world, we don't ask, can the model detect this fraud pattern? We ask, what happens to a real seller, a real transaction, a real dollar if the model is wrong and nobody catches it before it acts? That second question is the autonomy dial question. Here's the first reframe I want to give you. Autonomy isn't on, off. It's not human in the loop versus fully autonomous. That's a false binary. And it's why so many autonomy conversations go nowhere. People are arguing past each other because they're picturing two different points on a much longer dial. I think about it as five rough positions. One, suggest. The agent proposes an action, a human reviews and decides. Nothing happens without explicit approval. Two, act with pre approval on scope. The agent can act autonomously, but only inside a boundary a human defined ahead of time. Refunds under $50. Sure. Refunds over $50? No, that's a different action entirely. And it routes to a human. 3, act, then notify. The agent acts immediately and tells a human after the fact. The human can reverse it, but the default is action, not review. 4, act and escalate only on uncertainty. The agent acts silently in the confident cases and only surfaces to a human when its own confidence or some signal drops below a threshold. 5. Full autonomy. The agent acts, adapts, and even redefines its own next steps with no human touchpoint at all. Genuinely rare in production today, and honestly rare for good reason. Most teams think they're choosing between 1 and 5. In practice, the interesting, defensible, valuable product decisions almost all live in 2, 3, and 4. That's where the dial actually gets turned in real systems. And here's the thing, the right position on that dial isn't a personality trait of your product. It's not we're an autonomous first company or we're a human in the loop company. It should be a per decision setting. Which brings me to the next piece. If the dial position shouldn't be a company wide vibe, what should actually set it? I use three variables and I want to walk through each one because I think this is the part most teams skip. First, reversibility. Ask, if the agent is wrong, can I undo it and at what cost? A drafted email sitting in a queue, fully reversible, cost of being wrong is basically zero. Push that dial toward autonomy without much worry. A dollar that's already been refunded to a customer, or a fraud flag that's already frozen, a seller's payout that's expensive, sometimes impossible to fully undo. Even if you claw it back, you've damaged trust, maybe created a compliance event. That pulls the dial hard toward human review, or at minimum toward tight scoped boundaries with tripwires. The mistake I see constantly, teams evaluate autonomy risk based on how often the agent is wrong. Accuracy. But accuracy is the wrong first lens. A 99.9% accurate agent making an irreversible decision can still be a five alarm fire because that 0.1% might be catastrophic and unrecoverable. A 90% accurate agent making a fully reversible decision might be totally fine to run wide open because the cost of the misses rounds to zero. Reversibility, not accuracy, is your primary dial setter. Second variable when it's wrong, who and what does it touch? One customer's inbox? Fine, contain it. A shared data pipeline that 17 downstream systems consume? A pricing decision that recalculates for a whole seller segment? That's a different blast radius entirely. And the dial has to reflect that even if the reversibility profile looks similar on paper. I'd actually push you to think about blast radius across two axes. How many entities does one bad decision touch, and how fast does it propagate before a human could plausibly notice? An agent making one bad call to one user is contained. An agent making the same systemic bad call across every user because the underlying model or rule shifted, that's a blast radius problem hiding inside what looked like an autonomy problem. Third, can a human or a downstream system cheaply check whether the decision was right either before or shortly after it happens? If verification is cheap and fast, you can afford to let the agent act first and verify after that's your act, then notify tier. If verification is expensive, slow, or requires expertise that isn't sitting there in real time, you probably need the check before the action, not after. This is where a lot of let's just add a human in the loop designs quietly fail. By the way, they add a review step, but the human reviewing has no real way to verify the decision faster or better than the agent did. That's not oversight, that's theater. It gives you the feeling of governance without the substance of it. So, reversibility, blast radius, verifiability, run any agentic decision through those three, and you land on a much more defensible dial position than we felt good about the demo. Let me give you the failure patterns I see most often because I think naming them is more useful than another framework. Failure 1, static dials. Teams set the autonomy level once at launch and never revisit it. But the right dial position should move as your confidence in the system's real world performance grows, or as the model, the data distribution, or the stakes change. I'd argue the dial should be one of the most actively product managed parameters in your whole system, reviewed on a cadence, not a launch decision you make once and forget. Failure 2, confusing model confidence with decision worthiness. A model can be very confident and very wrong, especially on inputs that are subtly out of distribution from what it was trained or evaluated on. Confidence scores are a signal, not a verdict. If your escalation logic is only escalate when confidence is low, you've built a system that's blind to confident silent failures, which frankly are the scariest kind. Failure 3, no graceful degradation path. What happens when the agent's escalation queue backs up, or the human reviewer is out sick, or the review SLA quietly slips? A lot of designs assume the human in the loop is always there, always fast, always available. In practice, that queue becomes a bottleneck, and teams under pressure quietly widen the autonomy dial just to clear the backlog, which is exactly the wrong reason to turn the dial. Failure 4, treating autonomy as a technical decision instead of a stakeholder one. Who actually owns the decision of where the dial sits? Engineering, legal, the product team, the business owner? Who eats the cost when it's wrong? If that's not explicit, the dial gets set by whoever happened to write the prompt. That's not a governance model, that's an accident with a change log. Failure 5, no path back. Can you turn the dial down quickly if something goes wrong in production? I've seen teams that can scale autonomy up easily but have no fast tested mechanism to pull it back, no kill switch, no fast rollback to the more conservative tier. If you can't turn the dial down in minutes, you don't actually control it. You just hope it behaves. Okay, let's make this actionable. If you're a PM, here's a simple exercise I'd run with your team, and it doesn't need a big workshop. You can do this in an hour. Take every distinct decision your agent makes, not the agent as a whole, the individual decision types inside it, because different decisions inside the same agent often deserve different dial settings, and score each one across the three variables: reversibility, low, medium, high; blast radius, contained, moderate, systemic; verifiability, cheap and fast; slow or expensive. Anything that's low reversibility, systemic blast radius, and slow to verify, that's your suggest only tier. Full stop, no negotiation, no matter how good the demo looked. Anything high reversibility, contained blast radius, cheap to verify, that's your candidate for the widest autonomy you're willing to grant, and probably where you should be investing your agent building effort first, because it's the safest place to actually learn what good autonomous behavior looks like in production. Everything else lives in the middle tiers, scoped pre approval, or act then notify. And that middle band is genuinely where I think the best product thinking happens, because it's not a binary choice, it's a design surface. You get to decide the scope boundaries, the notification cadence, the escalation triggers, the confidence thresholds. That's product work. That's the actual craft. One more piece I'd add to this exercise: write down explicitly who owns the dial position for each decision type, and what the trigger is for revisiting it, a specific accuracy drop, a specific volume of overrides, a specific time period. If you can't answer who moves this dial and when, you've identified a gap, and that's worth surfacing before you ship anything. If you remember one thing from this episode, let it be this: Autonomy is not a single switch you flip for your product. It's a dial you set per decision based on how expensive and how permanent it is to be wrong. And it's a dial you have to keep your hand on, not one you set and walk away from. The teams that are going to build trustworthy agentic products aren't the ones who bravely grant the most autonomy fastest. And they're also not the ones so cautious that a human has to bless every trivial action, because that just means you built an expensive form filler, not an agent. The teams that win here are the ones who've done the unglamorous work of mapping out which decisions deserve which level of trust and who've built the muscle to move that dial deliberately in both directions as evidence comes in. That's a product management problem before it's an engineering problem. It's a judgment problem before it's a model capability problem. And honestly, I think that's good news for those of us who came up in product, not in ML research, because this is exactly the kind of ambiguous, stakes weighted, cross functional judgment call that's always been the actual job. That's the autonomy dial. Next time you're reviewing an agent design, yours or someone else's, I challenge you to ask three questions out loud in the room. If this is wrong, can we undo it? Who else does it touch? And how would we even know it was wrong? If this episode was useful, share it with a PM on your team who's about to ship their first agent. This is exactly the conversation to have before launch, not after the incident review. I'm Madhumita. This has been Product Mastery in the age of AI and ChatGPT. Until next time, go turn your dial on purpose, not by accident.